Wednesday, we covered the story of two Labour MPs who were denied entry to Gaza because they dared criticise Israel. Some Labour figures have spoken out, including Emily Thornberry, and I do find that interesting that they won't call out a genocide, but this is the red line. However, one Labour MP has taken us by surprise.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For 13 years before my election, I worked as director of an organisation called We Believe in Israel, and I refer the House to my register of interests. Part of my job was to lead study tours for British politicians to visit Israel. Incidentally, every single trip I led also visited the West Bank to hear Palestinian perspectives on the conflict. I commend my two honourable friends for wanting to visit the region and see the situation for themselves. We probably disagree on aspects of the conflict, but they are moderate voices who support a two-state solution. I think it is outrageous that they were detained and not allowed entry. Does the Ministry agree that it is vitally important for honourable members to visit Israel and the West Bank and see the situation firsthand? That this helps people arrive at an informed, nuanced and balanced view, and that anything that hinders this is to be deplored?
Yes, that is ultra-Zionist shitlord Luke Akehurst, Luke Nukem, Nuke Akehurst, whatever you want to call him. He criticised Israel. Now, why is this a shock? I mean, for those that don't know, it's because he is Labour's biggest Zionist. He has been a staunch supporter of Israel his entire political career. In fact, he was essentially an agent of the Israeli state whilst being in a British political party. He was the director of We Believe in Israel, which is an organisation that promotes the interests of the state. A big critic of Jeremy Corbyn and anyone remotely left-wing, he has pushed pro-Israel propaganda for years. It was almost my dream job to run a pro-Israel campaigning organisation, he told one journalist. He has fought strongly against the boycotts, divestments and sanctions campaign and consistently defended Israel's military onslaughts against Palestinians. Akehurst has particularly close ties with the Israeli embassy in London. He has spoken at conferences alongside Israeli officials and travelled with embassy staff to campaign events across the country. In 2017, Al Jazeera's groundbreaking documentary The Lobby showed Israeli embassy official and suspected intelligence officer Shai Massot discussing Akehurst in glowing terms. He's a great campaigner, Massot said. He's one of the best he is one of the best in the inside in all of the party. Seriously, there's not a lot of people like him. Now, just as he was selected to be a Labour candidate in the last election, Akehurst deleted 1,000 tweets, but of course we have some of the receipts. In 2023, he tweeted, "Personal opinions, not those of We Believe in Israel. I'm in favour of major West Bank settlement blocks becoming part of Israel and a new Palestinian state getting compensatory land swaps from pre-1967 Israeli territory. I want the Golan Heights to remain part of Israel." What, do you mean after they stole it? In 2018, he said, "If Palestinians don't desire to be treated in the way that they do, then a possible solution would be to extend human rights to that of rats." Wow. Now, this next one I think is a really, really funny one. There was a Hamas intelligence facility in the same building. Councillor Paul Peacock said, "A secret one?" Luke Akehurst says, "That's what intelligence bases are. They don't have a sign on the door." Peacock then says, "How did you know about it?" Luke responds with, "The IDF Twitter feed." You can't trust Twitter on the best of times, but the IDF Twitter feed, oh my God, of course, they always tell the truth 100%. But you can't forget this one, which is my all-time favourite. Always bemused by people whose primary political cause is abolition of the world's only Jewish state, getting affronted at the suggestion they might be a bit anti-Semitic. "Do you think the UN is anti-Semitic, Luke?" And Luke responds, "Yes." Luke being one of the first people calling the UN anti-Semitic. I mean, look, he's a really, really funny guy. Helena, look, I'm finding it odd. We have Labour MPs who've stood by and watched the atrocities happen without a peep, even endorsing the Israeli war crimes. Yet they, incorrectly I might add, are attacking Israel for blocking Wan Yang and Abitsam Mohammed. But even Luke Akehurst is doing it. I'm at a loss. Please, can you make it sense, essentially?
Well, when you're a liberal Zionist, one thing that you have to maintain is the West's friendship with Israel. So anything that the Israeli state does that can hinder that relationship is something that you're not in favor of. So obviously there's this position where he doesn't mind settlement blocks, illegal settlement blocks being absorbed into Israel. He doesn't mind things like these violations of international law. Continues to support what Israel has done up until this point, but will obviously draw the line at anything that could undermine broad kind of centrist liberal support for Israel, which this does. There are plenty of liberals who may not pay attention to the Israel-Palestine conflict, who may have sympathy with the Zionist cause, but are fundamentally going to be put off by Israel, or at least the current Israeli regime. That's why a lot of liberals say the issue is Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the problem. It is him being in charge. There's not an ideological problem. There's not a material problem. There's nothing going on here that's kind of a large scale here that's underlying everything. No, there is one man, there's an evil bad man in charge. Get rid of the bad man, everything is fine. So you'll hear a lot of talk about Netanyahu being bad, or this thing that undermines the Western this thing that undermines Western friendship with Israel. That might be a bad thing, which is what we're seeing here. It's terrible that these people who want to make an informed decision about the conflict for themselves, right, being removed from Israel. We talked a lot about, from Emily Thornberry saying these are hard-working, respected MPs, and I'm just like, well, in the grand scheme of things, sure, it's bad. It was bad when Kemi Badenoch sided with Israel in this whole discussion. Crazy to think that a British statesperson could side with a foreign state in this way. But is any of this worse than all of the dead children? And dead children, like when that's the line that gets crossed is something that undermines Western support for Israel rather than, Israel's continued violence of international law.
Well, I mean, what you're saying there reminds me of Emily Thornberry, because she attacked Kemi Badenoch and she said, "Oh, this is absolutely disgraceful." And of course, you're getting more so-called moderate MPs involved, even Luke Akehurst. And you're right. I find it really, really strange that this is the thing that really pisses them off. But of course, all the atrocities that's happened, not just since the 7th of October, but before then, gets a pass. But again, with someone like Luke Akehurst, he is someone who would expect to defend Israel to the hilt. It's something he pretty much does. So much to say that I wouldn't even call him a liberal. He's pretty conservative in my estimation. Is it because there's been a lot of Labour figures calling it out and Luke feels a bit more safer to do this? Or do you feel like there is an ideological underpinning that he genuinely thinks this is bad, but that doesn't make him any less of a horrific Zionist?
I think the latter. I think the latter is right, because at the end of the day, if you want to have a position where you can use your power as the government to back up what you perceive to be your strategic alliance with what the aircraft carrier in the Middle East that Israel is, right? They believe in this relationship with the Western colonial project in Israel. There are plenty of Zionists who think that it's the two-state solution supporters, liberal Zionists like this. But at the end of the day, if they don't see the Palestinian state being formed, for example, something is approaching the Green Line, the 67 armistice borders, as being an imposition on Israel's position as the bulwark against the East for Western interests, right? That's a very liberal Zionist position to be able to think that. And, for example, having Netanyahu in the administration who undermines that by saying the quiet part out loud, or who undermines that by pissing off Western dignitaries to the country and deporting them with no good reason and hiding their actions in the West Bank, which is the whole decision for this, it undermines their interests more broadly. Luke Akehurst is not an unstrategic thinker, right? You may not like him, you may not like his decisions, you may not like things that he believes. I certainly don't. But he's not someone who was without strategy. That's why he remained a member of the Labour Party for so long, when people who were diametrically opposed to his interests were in charge of the party infrastructure. He remained a member for all of this period because he was a strategic thinker and he wanted to be there when he was going to be able to make use of that. He was strategic in being an NEC member to get himself appointed as an MP, and he was strategic in terms of how he positioned himself to ensure that he would be able to be powerful enough to see his particular ideological policies be put into practice. So he's not going to let his own personal beliefs cloud the position that he needs to take to try and bolster his own position in a party that is slightly less pro-Israel than he is, even though they're very pro-Israel.
And this is the most important question, but what's your favourite Luke Akehurst nickname? I mean, I like Luke Nukem, but we've had a couple, and we knew Akehurst is one. I made a typo when we were writing the script, and I accidentally wrote Luke Akehurst, and I was like, do you know what? That's how I feel when I see him. What's your favourite?
I don't know. I don't think I have a particular favourite nickname, but my favourite thing about him is that he still defends the Vietnam War to this day.
Yes.
No one defends the Vietnam War. Like, how do you defend what happened in Vietnam?
Oh.
It's crazy. And he had that as a litmus test for people being allowed to join the Labour Party under Corbyn. Like, part of the litmus test of being centrist enough was, did you think that the Vietnam War was a good thing? And I'm just like, well, that probably shut down most of the Conservative Party as well.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.